we're not running a self-sufficient type economy. We consume far more than we produce, and we borrow far more than we save. And the fact that we do that means that the rest of the world is supporting us. The rest of the world is saving what we borrow. The rest of the world is producing what we consume. And the media and the conventional wisdom is that this relationship is somehow symbiotic when it's really parasitic. And the media portrays it as if America is the engine of the world economy, when in reality we're the caboose. See, the fact of the matter is, the world doesn't produce because we consume. America consumes because the world produces. The world doesn't save because America borrows. We're only able to borrow because the world saves. Now, the problem is, when the world is producing and giving us their products, they don't think that they're just giving them to us. They think they're getting paid. The problem is they're not getting paid. We're not exporting products to pay for these imports. We're asking the world to hold our IOUs in the form of U.S. dollars. That's why we're not paying for these purchases. We're giving them IOUs. But the problem is the value of the dollar is continuing to fall, and the only thing holding it up is foreign central banks themselves, who we've got conned into believing that their salvation lies in their ability to sell products to Americans who can't afford them. And so foreign central banks, particularly in Japan and China, keep buying U.S. dollars so that the IOUs that America's suppliers, corporations, are accumulating aren't evaporating. And so they'll continue to sell to us. But, the problem is they're falling. And, during most of the 1980s and 1990s, the way we as Americans were able to convince foreigners to hold our IOUs and sell us products in exchange for IOUs instead of products was because we were able to offer the promise of higher interest rates. The U.S. dollar and U.S. dollar debt paid higher rates of interest than the debt in our creditors in Asia and in Germany. That's not the case today. Today, with Alan Greenspan, the rates are so low. Our Fed funds rate is 1.25. Interestingly enough, the Reserve Bank in New Zealand just raised the interest rates 25 basis points today. They're now at 6%, and they indicated future rates are coming. So New Zealand's at 6%. We're at 1.25. Our rates are so low that it doesn't make any sense for people around the world to hold our currency. Why would somebody in Europe or Asia want to hold their savings in U.S. dollars, accept a lower rate of return than they can get in their own currency, and then have all the risk that the currency goes down? In fact, the United States right now, we have the lowest real interest rates in the world. Even though people talk about, rates in Japan are lower than they are here. The nominal rate's lower, but not the real rate. We've got an inflation rate at a very, very minimum of 5 or 6%. I think it's probably closer to 10%. But we have an enormous rate of inflation in this country, and we have next to no interest rates. So the real rate of return is solidly negative. And the problem is, the reason that Greenspan is keeping rates this low is because he can't raise them. He knows he can't raise them because the whole economy is addicted to these low interest rates. We know how vulnerable the average American is to higher interest rates because he has an adjustable rate mortgage, he's got credit card debt, he's got auto loan. We know the corporations are all leveraged up with short-term debt. We know the government is completely borrowed in the short end of the curve. We know that there are hedge funds and all kinds of financial institutions that have been operating on the profits from the carry trade, and not John Kerry trade, but carry trade, which means they're borrowing short from the Fed at low rates of interest and lending long to people who want to buy houses. They're buying mortgage-backed securities, Ginnie Mae's, Fannie Mae's. And these people are leveraged up on the carry trade, and higher interest rates could bankrupt these institutions because it will undermine the value of their collateral. And if you've borrowed at 1 or 2% and you've lent long at 5 or 6%, what happens if short rates go up to 7 or 8%? Now it's costing you more on your short-term debt than you're earning on your longer term that you own. You're underwater. The whole thing turns around. So this economy, Greenspan can't raise rates, but that means he has to keep on inflating, which means the dollar is going to collapse until the point where they can finally get ahead of the curve and raise interest rates significantly above the rate of inflation. But we know they can't do that because it would be, the real estate bubble would burst, the stock market would collapse, the bond market would collapse. We'd get bankruptcies in government-guaranteed entities like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Pension Guarantee Corp would probably go under. A lot of the financial institutions would go under. And the incredible amount of money that the Federal Reserve would then have to print to monetize all these catastrophes would guarantee even more inflation and an even more rapid decline in the dollar. So the point is, the Federal Reserve is caught in a situation where it can't do anything. It can't acknowledge the problem because that would be a disaster. It can't raise interest rates to try to ward off the inflation because that's going to, kill the economy. They can't do anything. All they can do, all Greenspan can do, is stand there before Congress and lie. All he can do is try to paint a rosy scenario and hope that this goes on a little bit longer. And unfortunately, the longer this goes on, the worse the ultimate collapse is going to be for the U.S. economy, because the deeper and deeper we go into debt. This is the problem. The problem is we continue to borrow more money from foreign creditors to pay for imported products, and week after week we shut down factories, we lose industrial capacity, become more and more dependent on foreign suppliers and foreign savers. And every week that the housing bubble doesn't burst, that's another guy that can go out and borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars with zero down, with an interest-only, negative amortized, 40-year mortgage, and pay 3 times or 4 times what a house is worth. All this debt is being accumulated the longer this situation persists. And the problem is, I think, it's now grown to a point that we're very near the breaking point. We're very near the point where foreign creditors are just going to walk away. They're going to realize that America can't pay these bills. And in fact, I think they've already realized that to a great extent. That is why foreign central banks are now buying so much U.S. dollars. I think during the first quarter, foreign central banks actually purchased about 150% of all the new government bond issues, meaning they bought all the bonds the government sold to finance the deficit, plus more. And that's because I think private interest, private demand for the U.S. government debt is evaporating, because individuals who are making their own decisions with their own money, they don't want to buy this stuff. I mean, they don't want to buy U.S. dollars, but foreign central banks, they don't care. It's taxpayer money. They're not concerned if these are bad investments because it's not their money. So they're the buyers right now of U.S. Treasuries, and this got to be indicative that we're at the end of our rope here. And I think we're going to see a pretty big decline very quickly, which is why even long-standing Euro-Pacific Capital clients who are listening, hopefully somebody's listening. This is a time to really be adding to your accounts. This is a time to be getting those last bits of U.S. currency out. Get rid of your dollars now while you still have a chance, while there are still people around the world who are foolish enough to give you New Zealand dollars or Swiss francs or euros in exchange for your U.S. dollars at anywhere near the current exchange rate, because this is going to be a huge collapse of the dollar. And the net effect of this whole thing is going to be a massive redistribution of purchasing power. Americans are going to be a lot poorer. Things are going to cost a lot more for Americans, but they're going to cost a lot less for a lot of other people. All the products that Americans used to consume are still going to get consumed. They're just not going to get consumed by Americans. They're not being produced by Americans, so why should they be consumed by Americans? They're going to start to be consumed by the people who are producing them. And, a perfect example of that would be oil, which could get me into my next topic, as the price of oil today hit $43 a barrel for the first time probably ever. They're saying on the news it's a 21-year high, but I think they've only been trading futures contracts for 21 years. I think this is the highest price in dollars oil has ever traded. And you know something? It's going a lot higher. I've been predicting this for years. At the beginning of the year, I had a year-end forecast of $50 for oil, and, it was closer to 20 when I made it, and here we are, we're almost there. But oil prices are going to keep on rising. But the reality is oil prices aren't really rising. What's happening is the value of the dollar is falling. And as the value of the dollar falls, you need more and more dollars to buy the same barrel of oil. That's what's happening. It's not that the oil price is rising, it's that the value of the dollar is falling. And the value of the dollar is going to continue to fall, and therefore we're going to continue to have to send more and more of our depreciating dollars to OPEC to afford their oil. That's just the bottom line. And ultimately, when some of these foreign central banks, particularly in Asia, stop supporting the dollar and really let it collapse, the price of oil is going to skyrocket. It's not going to be